do have a couple questions to the panelists here. One of the things, if you hear about all those tools or all those new specifications or technologies coming up, illustrated by several, some of our panelists here, things like user interface socket and things like task modeling, it seems like the dream comes true. And especially when Professor talked about the speech and natural language, as he said, I mean, this is something that it's always like next 2 or 3 years, and we never see it. So tell us that how far away are we in terms of putting these new technologies or interface into the products? And more importantly, I know this industry has worked on various industry initiatives in the past. I don't mean to knock any, the novel work this industry has done, but there have been a number of initiatives that really didn't come to light when it comes to the commercial products. So tell us what could be the barriers for any of those emerging technologies to be actually implemented in consumer products to make the products easy to understand and easy to use. Any taker?
I can take that. Well, I'll start with talking about Sony and probably many of the CE manufacturers. If you want to talk just about when will we adopt some of these technologies that have been introduced today, it's when they work. And the only example I can give you of what that means is the Apple Newton. When it was overhyped, it didn't recognize handwriting away. It was told. They told you it would. And what that actually did was delay the introduction or the consumer adoption of palm devices, of little devices, for many years, because after that faux pas, it not working as expected, consumers just didn't believe it, even though handwriting recognition or the character matching was actually starting to work quite well. They just didn't believe it and wouldn't buy it. So learning from the Apple Newton lesson, this intelligent speech recognition stuff, if it gets that wrong once or twice when you're trying to use your TV, you're going to throw it away or the remote through the screen or something. We won't be able to ship that. So summary from our point of view is these things really have to work. It can't be an experiment on a consumer.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And anything that has to do with speech, we are 1,000 times less tolerant than we are going to be with anything else, like punching keys and stuff. Because we always blame it on the machine being stupid, ourselves being stupid, not knowing what it is. But as soon as we get around to speech, we're so used to talking. And even little children, we rate little children as being not very smart. And so if they can understand English well, then a computer should be able to understand English, right? So anything to do with speech is going to have a really high bar and suffer that. In terms of timing, as you saw, the task modeling standards are moving forward. The interface socket, it's called the Universal Remote Console. The interface socket standards are, there's now 5 ANSI standards on those, and there's a 5-part ISO standard that's in FDIS. So the underlying technologies are now solidifying for these. And if people are interested in that, I have a flyer afterwards, and there's some demonstrations being done later too. The speech is a really interesting one to watch. And the best way to do that is just to watch the headlines, because whenever there's a breakthrough in that area, it always pops up. There was a big announcement yesterday. They're now announcing the demonstrations at the show of devices you just speak into it. It'll speak back to you in another language. So it not only recognizes your speech, it not only figures out what you're saying, it translates it into another language and then plays it back to you in real time. So these kinds of things are moving forward. The thing I pointed out about the interface socket before that may help us here is that you can ship products with traditional interfaces on them. And if they also have the interface socket, you can then have people go out and buy and experiment with other interfaces which they reject, do whatever, but it doesn't kill the product. In the past, as he pointed out, if you ship a whole product with a speech interface and it doesn't work, man, that's your reputation that went down in your product, and what are they going to do with the product, and now they're mad at you. So this ability to have an alternate interface can allow us as a group and as a field to experiment with different technologies, different interface technologies in ways we couldn't before.
Yeah, let me give just a quick update as far as what industry is doing on solutions. And I think speech is a good example, and handwriting is both a good example. I think we all did learn a couple of decades ago, don't roll out a new user interface technology before it's ready. And what we have learned is if you roll it out very carefully in small increments, that you can create real value proposition for people without creating that disaster that occurred 15 years ago. I'll give an example right now. On Motorola phones, for instance, I have what's called the Ming phone, which is a very popular touchscreen-based phone in China. I can use speech recognition on this phone to augment my ability when I'm driving my car. If I want to check the signal, if I want to see if there's adequate radio signal, I can just say into my Bluetooth ear microphone, check signal, and it will come back and it will say signal is 80%, 100%, whatever. And then I can make a phone call very confidently, knowing what the signal level is. A very simple thing, but it means I can keep my hands on the wheel and my eyes on the road and immediately find out what the signal strength is for the radio. I can check time, I can check whether I have new messages, and a variety of simple commands. It's using a different modality, and its real value is freeing me up. It's not full-length dictation. And, you know, in our business of human-computer interaction, Star Wars is probably one of our worst enemies, because all the computers in the system are complete natural language, humanistic interaction capability. And that's not really the way it gets rolled out intelligence-wise. It'll be incremental, real value-add intelligence.
I'd just like to briefly comment on a new model for software development that's beginning to get a lot of attention, which I think may bode well for learning over time. It's this gradual introduction of new innovations. In the past, when you own the entire user interface, you have to work on this very complicated new thing, and when you think you're done, you put it out, and then you start finding bugs that your testing didn't attach to. Companies are now beginning to investigate developing software that runs native on devices as well as runs over a server, more like web pages are developed, such that your users can elect to go to an area and look at the new stuff and play around with it, and it isn't a full-blown 100% revamp. There's a small segment of the module of the functionality that's different, and over time you introduce these incremental updates, upgrades, changes, new features. It's a very different model for developing software. And it may change the way that it actually gets tested and introduced to people, rather than the big unveiling and the big, hold your breath until it either fails or doesn't. There are many options within that model. What's made that possible is the high bandwidth and the fact that devices are increasingly networked, so they're regularly in touch with the source of the new code. So that's just a new technology for developing technology and software that I think may help or at least change fundamentally the delivery mechanism for software.
You guys make 2 quick comments
Sure.
also, so everyone else has a chance.
Okay.
I'm not fast enough here. First of all, regarding speech interfaces, I very much believe in speech and natural language interfaces. However, I think it's important not to get overly focused on it, because there are a lot of things you can do to make things better without solving the speech problem. So one of my examples there was a non-speech interface, as you might have seen. It was still high level, easy to use. My second comment really is about, I was thinking about market barriers to all this technology, and I think one of the most important things that needs to happen is really in the retail end, at the customer end. I mean, basically, the very first time that a salesman in a CE store says to the customer, you should buy this device instead of that device, even though they're both the same price, and the other one has a much longer feature list, because the one with the shorter feature list is actually going to be a lot easier for you to use. And that's not happening. And so companies like mine are tremendously feature list driven. And I think fundamentally that mentality won't change, or at least something that will help that mentality change is a lot more education and pull from the customer, from the retail side, and the distribution channels. And I think that's really important. So those of you who are in that side of the industry, I think you need to say to manufacturers, we can sell more of things that they're easier to use. Because that message is not getting through, I don't think, yet.